You sent me that video of Jeannie's victim from Bellevue about a month ago. And then shortly after, Melissa sent us a message that said that the Assemblies of God had finally taken away her ministry credentials. And a lot of people would be very happy about that. It made me furious. Furious. Because the Assemblies of God has known for 5 years what I just told you. About Jordan, about the youth pastor, about the student. Not only were those stories told, but then you had the Facebook group filled with hundreds of stories of students talking about hazing and spiritual and mental and verbal abuse. You had other staff members of hers that were telling these people, Dr. Mark Merrill and the other people on this investigation team. And then the Assemblies of God gave her their blessing by allowing her to continue to minister as a credentialed minister for the next 5 years.
Hello, everybody. Mike Donahue here with Brian May. Brian's on vacation up in Colorado.
Yes, I am.
Climbing the mountains, hiking through
Yes,
the trails. How's it doing? How's it going? You liking it?
It's going great. I love it. I always love it. Bad day in
you go there a lot.
Yeah, bad day in Colorado is better than good day just about anybody or anywhere else as far as I'm concerned. So,
Well, aren't you a zealot? You're a Colorado zealot. I saw a picture of you running into a moose. Didn't you run into a moose like out of the blue?
We were walking on a trail and we just kind of walked around a corner and boom, there was this moose eaten by the side of the
was
trail.
right there.
He was. I saw a squirrel too, but I didn't see like a.
What was the squirrel's name?
Rocky T. Squirrel.
That's right, Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Yes,
and then they have the Russians, Morticia
and
Boris
and Morticia. Yeah.
Natasha.
Natasha, Boris and Natasha, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So I found the moose and squirrel.
It dates us. Well,
yeah, it does.
Everybody, thanks for all the comments with Jordan last week. That was quite, I knew when we aired that it was going to get a lot of comments and a lot of thoughts. And just to clarify, this podcast is for people to tell their story. And some of those people that are going to tell their story are going to be more perpetrator than victim, or in your opinion, depending on how you look at it. But we're not advocating anybody's behavior or anything like that. We're just giving everybody a chance to tell their story. And we knew that when Jordan came on, it was going to be controversial. There has been some pushback that I kind of want to talk about real fast. There's been some criticism about him not sharing details of his moral failure. Even calling it a moral failure has offended some of you, but I'm just going to tell you, and you can be mad at me, I'm the one that told him not to do that. Partly because it really wasn't the point. I felt like he was very repentant about that and very detailed with me about it. When I asked him exactly what happened, he told me everything. And then I actually did talk to the victim and it checked out. So I didn't feel like, airing that would be appropriate. I mean, it's embarrassing to the person, to all persons, but especially to the victim. So, and it really wasn't the point. The point is that he was in a system that was abusive and it was cult-like, and we wanted to talk about that system. And to be honest with you, probably 95% of the testimonies, we've heard are that, it's very few people really talk about that incident. That incident's horrific, and I'm not trying to whitewash it at all, but most of the people that are coming forward and talking about their stories really don't even know what happened. Like, that's not their issue. Their issue is what happened to them. And so that's what I kept pushing him on. And I pushed him. I asked him a couple times to look at the camera and, tell people what they want to hear. they're sorry. And I'll be honest, and I've told him this, I'm not 100% sure he was completely honest about all of that. I mean, I would have liked more transparency about those details, but maybe that'll come later. He's open to coming back on. Um, so we'll see. But I was happy with, you know, with most of what he was doing. And again, I was asking him questions about Jeannie and those things. So um, he wasn't using Jeannie to like duck out. We were asking him specific questions about the system, and fully aware that he's a perpetrator, fully aware that he had, when we have the stories, we know more than
Yeah.
most of you. So we know that he was part of that, and he knows we know. So, but and then also the one thing I really do like a lot is the fact that he is opening himself up to, to hearing stories directly, and people are calling him and talking to him, and I've talked to him since then, and some of that stuff's not pretty. They've been beating him up pretty good, and and I told him this. I said this to him yesterday. I'm this way with everybody that I'm friends with. And yes, he's my friend. So I I'm like, I'll get your back. I'll get your back. I'm not going to get your front. I'm not going to get your front. You get your front. Right? If somebody comes at you the right way and confronts you, I'm not coming to your defense. If somebody comes to you your back and they try to cut you up, in a cheap way, I'll get you back. That's the
Yeah.
way I run. That's the way I was when I was growing up. So that's what I feel about it. I mean, we're gonna let him be a man and let him take his punches, but you know, it's got to be fair, because he was a victim
Right.
too. So
Right.
that's all. That's all we're saying, and we're not
Right.
again advocating for any kind of behavior at all, of course.
Right.
Right. And as Mike's mentioned, Jordan has invited anyone who wants to speak with him directly to do so, to get his contacts, he contact him on social media, speak with him directly. He's been taking those calls. He's been pacing it because obviously he can't take 100 calls a day. And I just want to underscore something here as well. This is a really complex situation. I mean, this is a very sophisticated cult kind of situation, and it is pretty complicated. And you don't get into these things overnight. You don't get out of them overnight. So a lot of the people that are commenting on the Facebook page, all of us are in process. I've probably been in process 8 years, and I'm still digging up things. So, but if you've got a beef with what we're doing here, please reach out to us. Help us do a better job of what we're trying to do here, and that is give everyone a voice.
Yeah, my name is not Geraldo. Like I'm Mike Donahue. I'm not a reporter. So like I just did the best I could to draw out what what was going on.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Right. So this week we're gonna have kind of a long episode, but I think it's well worth it. Tell us a little bit about our guest this week. We actually recorded this. Go ahead, Mike.
We have Adam Hulme on this week. He is a guy that worked with Jeannie as well, and kind of a controversial figure in his own right, because he was the one. I'm pretty sure he was the only one that got a cease and desist letter from her lawyers when he began to threaten to expose on a broader way. I think he threatened to expose some of the things to her board, and she fired off her lawyers fired off a letter to him, and which I would have taken and used it as toilet paper, because that's all it's worth. Because truth wins, and I mean, even in this stuff that we're saying, we're telling the truth. So if she wants to do anything legally, she's going to have to answer legally, in front of, and be deposed. So I don't think she wants to do that. And anyways, bottom line is he got pushed, bullied a little bit by her lawyers and backed up. But when all this stuff went down in 2020, and then when I wrote the book and then we had the podcast, Adam's been listening, he's been talking, listening to the podcast, and him and I talk probably every 3 or 4 months, and not trying to talk him into coming on. Never really asked him to come on, But after Jordan was on, he said, it's my time. So he wanted to come on. And so before we have him on, I know, Brian, you had a couple things you wanted
Yeah.
to kind of
Yeah.
clarify.
Yeah. And to be fair, when he got that cease and desist order, she held all the cards. She had all the money. She had the lawyers. Come to find out after the so-called investigation Adam will talk about, she had the AG on her side, and all he had was him. So he was in a hard place at that time. But karma's rough. Things come around, right, Mike?
Yep.
So today is today. So I just felt like we needed to put some context around some comments that Adam made, not to put words in his mouth, but to put some context around the environment that he was in. A lot of people will understand this, some won't. But at one point, Adam talks about Jordan struggling with same-sex attraction, and that really needs context. What people who aren't familiar on the inside of this thing understand that Jeannie's essentially cult, that's what I'm going to call her cult, was rife with a moral code that was very strict and very stringent. Her husband, Sam, was raised in the South. I mean, they brought this very super sort of conservative, sort of this weird mishmash of evangelical fundamental Pentecostalism to the plate. And it really, if you've been watching this podcast, the fact that we know that in reality, she had no moral code. She just had this system of control that she lorded over people in her program as another mechanism of control. But I mean, Mike and I both knew this. I mean, in that circle, drinking was taboo, smoking was taboo, having any sexual relationships outside of marriage is taboo. And I mean, if you have that conviction, that's fine. I'm not criticizing you for that. I'm just trying to tell you what it was like. They also taught and were deeply convicted that homosexuality, same-sex attraction, was a sin. And again, you can have whatever belief you have around that. I'm just going to say before I say anything else, the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. The second is to love your neighbor as yourself. In my personal faith walk, I'm really trying to work on that second one and make sure that I get that right before I move on to anything else. So I'm just going to leave that there. Anything to say to that before I move on, Mike?
No, well, yeah. Just the fact that it was all virtue signaling. It was control. It wasn't. They really weren't deeply convicted about homosexuality. It was just. It was a social sin at the time in the 80s. Right. I mean, Dr. Dobson was on the radio every 5 minutes talking about same-sex marriage, and there was a big push in the church to really go against homosexuality. And and again, Brian's right. You can have your opinion about it, but we here at the podcast, we're not, when Adam's talking about, that was a taboo thing at the, in the program that he was a part of, that's that program. So we're not endorsing any of those beliefs. I personally don't think, I think it was overly talked about, to be really honest with you, and stigmatized. So
right. And here at Groomed.Connect, at our corporate world headquarters, at the central office here, we're agnostic to your sexual orientation. We don't care about your religious beliefs. I'll tell you what we don't have any tolerance for. We have zero tolerance for people who hurt, use, and abuse others for their own benefit and refuse to own that they are doing that or have done that in the past, and refuse to call it what it is. And we have zero tolerance for those people who continue to support these people and enable these people. Zero tolerance. That is that's where we're going to draw the line here. Right. And when you hear the podcast, I believe the issue, for me anyway, with Jordan wasn't so much the same-sex attraction, but was the fact that he was in a position of a power and authority. And there was a real power imbalance there. And inside of that ministry, because he was so useful to Jeannie, he was allowed to openly exploit that power dynamic to groom and take advantage of what Adam will call impressionable young men. That's what's wrong, is that he was allowed in that system to use his power and his position to groom and basically manipulate these young men. Could have been men, could have been women, could have been anything, but that's what was wrong. And in effect, in my opinion, Mike, when Adam talked about that, I thought, you know what, apple didn't fall too far from the tree. He was doing exactly what was allowed in that system. I'm not
Right,
excusing it.
exactly
I'm
right.
just saying that's what was happening. So
Right. The fact that it was a same sex doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't matter. What matters is there was a grooming technique that was accepted in the social norm in that hierarchy, in that leadership team. And they were very loose on the terms when it came to, you know, relationships in general. I remember just being on Rockford and it was okay for me to be in a car at 11 o'clock at night with a teenage girl. I mean, I can't even think of that right now. I mean, I wouldn't even fathom that. Like, but it was in that system. Everybody did that because because Jeannie was doing it. She was,
yeah.
I'd walk by her car at, 12 o'clock at night. I'm coming out of the youth group, and there she is sitting there with a 22-year-old, good looking guy, and and face to face, and she's discipling him or whatever. Who the hell knows what was going on? And we know now that it could have been other stuff.
Yeah.
Who
Right.
knows? But
Right.
but that's the system that he's talking about. It was too liberal. It was just too gross,
Yeah. It was.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. It
yeah.
was very, very, very hypocritical. Two different standards. So, I hope you'll listen to this intently. It's an excellent interview. Adam really, I mean, he really brings the heat to places that, he brings light and heat to things that need light and heat. I really, I really enjoyed, if enjoy is the right word, the experience of hearing this story.
Okay, so with no further ado, we're gonna just jump right into this. So, Adam, take it away.
Yeah. So, let's see, I was a student at Master's Commission Atlanta in 2007 was my first year. And I came to Master's Commission because my youth pastor was a part of this thing called the cadre. I didn't know much about Jeannie or who she was, but I was wanted to be a youth pastor and had an opportunity to go be a youth pastor at a young age at 21 in Iowa. I was in Kansas at the time, and my youth pastor just kind of like stopped me one day, took me out to lunch, and was like, "Hey, man, like I went to ORU and Jeanne Mayo has this thing called Master's Commission where you can go and learn to be a youth pastor directly from her." And I remember he said, "She's like the Yoda of youth ministry." And as a Star Wars fan, that like really spoke to me. And so I got home from that lunch and looked at the Masters Commission Atlanta website and applied. And a couple days later, had an interview call and then got an acceptance thing in the mail. And within like 2 or 3 months, I'd moved my entire life down to Georgia and showed up at the Tabernacle. And it's funny, Juliana is actually the very first person I ever met on orientation day. She came out of the doors. I think she was a second year, and she was like, "Welcome to Masters Commission Atlanta." And I was like, "Whoa," and yeah, so I was in Masters Commission for 2 years. Um, pretty highly favored. Jordan and I hit it off right away. We were great friends during my first year and second year. And then, was given a lot of responsibility in my first year. I was a hard worker. I was a good talker. I knew how to gain a system really well. And so got favor quickly from Jordan and people like Jeannie. And then by the start of my second year, was given a lot of responsibility, was in charge of a sales call team for the National Youth Leaders Conference. And then by December of my second year, I was already having talks with Jeannie and Jordan about coming back to be on staff that following year. They were letting me know that a lot of the staff members that were there were going to be leaving for whatever reason, and that they would want me to be hired. And so kind of that whole last 6 months of my second year of master's, they would kind of clue me in on stuff that was going on with the staff and maybe problems they were having or whatever. And yeah, the next thing you know, I started working there. So yeah, it's pretty
Wow.
crazy.
Okay. Was there a big difference between being a student and then going on staff? Like, did you know what I mean? Did it open up the world a
Uh,
little bit more?
yeah, it definitely did. I think the biggest thing, because when I was a student there, obviously I helped out with all the things that students helped out with at the cadre, and obviously running an NYLC and all that sort of stuff. But I guess I never really understood how a lot of that stuff worked internally. And so, like I remember I was 23 years old, and all of a sudden I was in charge of iron groups at the cadre with youth pastors that have been youth pastors for decades, or whatever. And I was this 23-year-old kid in there leading iron group sessions. And um and I remember the very first iron group session I ever led, this guy told this crazy story about his marriage and an affair and all this sort of stuff. And I was just like, whoa, like, what is going on? Like, you're a youth pastor? Like, what is happening? Um, and then you see the behind the scenes stuff of how decisions are made. Like I remember being in interviews for first years to come back for a second year for the first time, and seeing the dialogue on the staff about people, students that want to come back and feel like God has called them to be in ministry or whatever, and how those things were talked about in real time. Um, you know, I don't know how much God was really involved in the decision-making process when, things are boiled down to how much does this person dress a certain way or act a certain way, or they ask too many questions, that sort of stuff. Um, and so, but I mean, you're 23 years old, you're working for Jeanne Mayo, like, and when you're around Jeanne Mayo, she feels like the biggest thing in the world, like other people on this podcast have said that, you know, uh, it's like it felt like working for a rock star, like, you'd have cadre members that would tell you like, oh man, when I was your age, if I was working for Jeanne Mayo, like, wow. And so you're just kind of like, shell shocked. You're like, dude, I must be awesome. Like Jeanne Mayo wants me to work for her. Like I must be really good, and I must be a really good pastor and good speaker and care about people. And you're teaching life. I'm teaching life lessons classes to 18-year-olds, and I'm 23. Like what more have I learned about life in 5 years than you? You know, uh, so it's interesting, like looking back on it now, like knowing what I know, it's it's uh it's definitely like more devious. The reason I was there, the reason the other staff members had left, like yeah, I mean I guess there's no reason to like hide it. Like I look back on it now, and the reason I was there was because I was Jordan's guy. Like me and Jeannie never really had a super close relationship. I was never a son, like Mike, like you were, like Jordan was. I was never a son, like we had an okay
I wasn't
relationship.
either,
Oh,
just
okay.
to be technical, but
Sure, sure. This is not
just to
not
clear
not
some
the
things
greatest,
up
like,
here.
yeah, not the greatest moniker, to just stuff with nail. Um, well, I was Jordan's guy, like if Jordan never used that language, he never did because we were similar in age. But like, I mean, me and him we were really, really good friends. Like he helped me with a lot of stuff when I was a first and second year. I respected him. I looked up to him, and he was my guy. But looking back on it now, I was there because I was his guy. I look back on it now knowing what I know, and the other staff members that were there the year previous, the Ann Tumbarellos, the Jennas, the Nick Nelsons, those people were run out of town because they had disagreements with Jeannie on how things were run. They had disagreements with Jordan on how things were run, on his interactions with students. Um, some of the other second year students that were supposed to come back and be on staff with me were ran out of town that year because they had concerns um, over some things that they had discovered about Jordan. And I remember in March, or no, it would have been April of my second year. So I had already known that I was going to be on staff, and there was another student and a support staff student that were going to come on staff as well. And I remember being at the Tabernacle in the choir room, and Jordan and Jeannie came and they sat me down and they said, "Hey, we need to talk." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And Jeannie goes, "Hey, we are going to rescind so and so's offer to be on staff. They have started to become really gossipy and have started really sharing some really negative things about other staff members. And so we're just going to let them go another way. And we would appreciate it if you would, slowly kind of cut ties with them as well and show, support for us." And I did,
and kiss the ring while you're doing it, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
I did. And that friend, me and him were really tight for a year and a half while we were in master's commission. And then, we didn't really talk for, 13, 14 years until everything blew up. And I was able to call him and apologize and go, "Hey man, I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but I turned my back on you and swore allegiance to Jeannie and Jordan, and the
Yeah.
rest is
Did
history."
you
So
find out from him what the circumstances was behind what behind him leaving? Like what was going on? When she
from
said he was gossiping, was he calling stuff out?
No, well, yeah, he was calling stuff out for sure.
Yeah.
But then he had just confronted Jordan about some of the things that we know Jordan's been confronted about.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Yeah.
Same sex attraction, being too close to guys, stuff like that, So,
Yeah.
and they told me that in 2020 as well when I was looking up some stuff to confront Jeannie about. So, yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, everybody who knows and has been around her knows that she's a very charismatic person, and it's pretty, easy for a young man such as yourself who has aspirations for youth ministry. And she's like the Yoda of youth ministry, as you put it. Maybe more the Emperor Palpatine. We're finding out now, but
Sure.
we'll go with Yoda. We'll go with Yoda for now. It's easy. It's easy to get sucked in and starstruck. But what strikes me about that story is, it feels like again, the classic cult-like tactic of let's isolate this guy. We see promise in this guy. We want to bring him on. Let's isolate him from anyone who might, poison his thinking. Did you ever look back and see it as that? I'm sure you didn't feel it that way at the time, but did you ever look back and see it that way?
No, I definitely see it that way. I
Yeah.
see it that way with that instance. There was another instance my first year where I had a similar thing happen to me. And then, as I look back on it now, the whole clearing out of the staff to bring me and this other person on it was that same thing. It was,
Uh-huh.
these people are being disagreeable with Jeannie and Jordan on XYZ issues, whether that's how they dealt with students, whether that's, um, Jordan's interaction with students, how the program was run. I mean, I remember, um, poking fun as a student, poking fun at staff members that would have normal weekends because like they weren't working as hard as all of us. Like that was the culture. The culture was work, work, work. Like, do
Right.
do whatever you can. And these staff members had put their foot down about wanting to have a weekend, and we as students made fun of them, and that trickled down from, support staff members, whatever. Um, but it was simple stuff like that, like if you wanted time off, you were a loser. Like, you know, get out of town,
That was a
so,
social norm that was there in the program.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
work, work, work. I mean, me and my wife, Lucy, were talking about that last night. Like even as staff members in the summer when the students weren't there, like we were expected to work, 5 days a week, 40 plus hours a week. It's like, what are we doing? There's no students here. Like there's like, I mean, I remember sitting around in my office sometimes just like making stuff up to do because Jeannie was in the other room. She was still working. And I was like, I don't want to go home. I don't want her to think I'm some loser, So like, I'll just sit in here until like 6:30 or something, and then I'll go home.
Yep.
So yeah, it was just the whole culture down there was all work, work, work. And the more you worked, the more favor you got. If you were a hard worker and you sacrificed yourself, your mental health, um, all that, then you were praised. You were sought after. You were sharp. Sharp.
Yep.
Right.
So Jeannie and Jordan and I really like sharp people. Sharp
Yeah.
people, sharp person.
So when you got on staff
Yeah.
and you started, now you're in the inner room, now you're seeing how the sausage is made. What was some of the first things that you were like, wait, this is a little, um, red flags started going up. It's a little crazy.
Um, I mean, I would definitely say some of the stuff that I saw. Well, not even some of the stuff that I saw. Um, Other people do. There was stuff that I would do. Like that I would be like, wow, that's wild. From messages that were spoken that were just a little too harsh, too directed at certain people. You know, uh, I don't really know. I mean, there's definitely things that that will probably come up later as we talk, that I don't necessarily want to share right now. It's kind of part of the bigger story of everything that happened in 2020. But I would say as you got in the inner room, you just saw a lot of fighting. There was a lot of fighting between Jeannie and Jordan on different things. Me and me and other staff members would fight about things. Like I remember the very first week on staff, me and one of my coworkers got in this huge fight about an office and just like the silliest little stuff. But I mean, we as a staff would bicker and gossip about each other all the time.
Yep.
I think seeing what Jeannie would say about people when those people weren't there, and Jordan as well, was always kind of wild, because like she was always so lovey to people. But then like behind closed doors, it was like, whoa, like you just said that about so and so, but like, you always tell them how great
But then
they are.
you saw her with so and so, and she
Yeah,
was in their face loving on them and
Right.
blah blah blah, and then you
Right.
turn
absolutely. But
around, she's like, "Wow."
but the wild thing about that is you almost felt privileged to see that
Yep.
side of her. You
Yep.
felt like she was giving you a secret to keep. It's like almost like, Adam, I trust you enough to be
Right.
honest with you about so and so because I know you're smart enough, you're sharp enough to not go behind my back and expose myself. So like it was like, hey, I trust you this much. And it made you feel good. But then at the
Yeah.
other times there was times where you're like, well, what does she say about me when I'm not around? Because like
Right.
if she would talk about staff members, to other staff members, it was like no one's off limits here.
Yeah.
So
That's
So there
classic
was a
grooming, by the way. That's a grooming technique that they use. Bring you into the fold, the secrets, you're special, you're different. I would never do that about you. You're my
yeah.
son, you're my whatever, whatever.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
And she did. I can attest, and Mike can too, that in the 80s when I was first exposed to her, into the 90s when I finally left the school. Same techniques. This is all the same thing, right? This is the playbook
sure.
that she's been writing and refining for decades. So this all feels really
Yeah.
familiar. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. So then, I mean, we were there. I was on staff for 7 years. So I was there 2 years as a student. I was on staff for
Wow.
7. And like we participated in all the stuff. Like I remember after everything happened in 2020, I was on the phone with Jordan actually. And at that time I was doing a lot for the student body of ALC, even though I hadn't worked there in 4 years. And so I was kind of like, on their side with stuff about like, yeah, man, we were abusive spiritually, verbally sometimes. Yeah, there was hazing, crazy hazing. And yeah, like, so like a lot of this stuff that people were saying is true. And I remember talking to Jordan about it, and he was like, come on, dude, like, what do you own in this? Like what part are you willing to own? And I told him, dude, I'm willing to own everything. Like I'm willing to own the fact that I was complicit in a cult that had that I was complicit in a system that abused people and uh wrongfully so for 7 years. And so like take that at face value. We did a lot of stuff there that was hurtful to people, you know. Um and I was a part of that system. I upheld that system. I may not have done some of the things that Jeannie and Jordan did, but I enforced their rules. I helped them control people. I was on their side. I had their back. I was in the room when they would yell at interns for going out and drinking a couple beers. And when I was in the room as a staff member while Jeannie would yell at young adults for having a couple beers. Like, I look back on that now and I go, what am I like, what are we doing? You know?
Yeah.
But the fact is I was involved. You know, the fact is I was there and I didn't say anything at the time. You know, like as the years went on, I got smarter. There were things that happened that I was like, whoa, I'm not okay with that. And I remember one of those times was in 2014 or 2015. I went with my sister who worked for a fraternity. She did leadership training for a fraternity. And I went to their like summer training program for all their chapter presidents. And they had a whole talk on hazing and why you shouldn't do it and the harms of hazing and all this sort of stuff. And I remember sitting there sweating bullets going, we're doing this stuff all the time in Atlanta, you know, like
Gosh, yeah.
we're doing this all the time. Like we are hazing young people, new first years that come in that would get hazed certain ways. Second years, when you would come back, there were different hazing rituals. You know, same thing, interns, there are different things that they went through. And some of them are silly, some of them are serious, but they're all meant to belittle. They're all meant as rites of passage of power structures from the senior leadership down. And then every year a student that went through that hazing ritual then turns around and does it to somebody else, and it's even more belittling or embarrassing or damaging. And so I remember I got back after that thing and I had a talk with Jordan and I was like, hey man, like if you want to keep doing what you're doing, just know I disagree with it, but like I'm not going to be involved in that stuff anymore. Like that's not how I see things. Um, so yeah, there were like some wake up calls as the years went on, but like, I mean, the reality is I worked there for 7 years and like, I didn't, you know, stand up to a lot of it while I was there. You know, it took me being gone for a couple years to go, oh shoot, like that's really messed up. You know, like I know the interview process has been talked about by a lot of students online. A second year interview was a terrible experience for any student. You know, you come in alone to all the staff of Master's Commission Atlanta or Atlanta Leadership College, and we don't even really ask you questions about who you are, why you want to be a second year. We would just use that as an arena to attack your insecurities, to attack your character, to you know, to speak up against you. And I mean, what is that? It's 10 or 11 staff members against one 18, 19, 20-year-old person. I mean, some of the things that I said in those rooms give, you know, they still cause me to feel terrible. You know, I know that I made people in that room feel awful, and and that's terrible, and that's something I cannot apologize enough for. You know, but we did it in the name of, you know, calling people to be better and, you know, making them more effective second years when they would come back, better leaders. You know, that's why we did it. But yeah, it was unfair. It was
I
bad.
was talking to Jordan about that, and he said that there was a time with him that Jeannie had basically said, called him out publicly among staff, saying he didn't have the guts to really lay into somebody in a second year. He was too nice.
Yeah.
And so the next person that came in, he's to his, you know, credit, he told me, he said, I was brutal. Like he said, I have so much regret because I just annihilated this girl or whatever. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so there was a
And
culture in that. Go
go
ahead,
ahead,
Brian.
Mike. I was going to
Oh,
say, let's be clear.
there's a culture in that whole thing that it you know, just to hurt people.
Yeah. And let's be clear. I mean, this is clearly purely and just in every way 100% hazing, because this is allegedly a Christian ministry, right? We all understand that it was basically a cult right now, but this is allegedly a Christian ministry, and all this was being done in the name of, I don't know what they told you, Adam, building the kingdom, or whatever. But this is just gross manipulative tactics that has absolutely nothing to do with what Christians believe. Well, what a lot of Christians understand Jesus came to do, right? This has nothing to do with that. Would did that ever occur to you at the time? Say, look, this is
Yeah.
really not. This doesn't line up with Jesus at all. Did that ever occur to you at the time when you were doing it?
No, no. I mean, to be fair though, like I I was not I was not doing things by the book. Like when I was there, I was a terrible Christian. I was a terrible pastor. Like looking back on my time there, I didn't do anything for the right reasons. I did everything to gain acceptance and approval from other people. It wasn't about God. It wasn't about making God greater. It was about how much acceptance and approval from these people can Adam get.
Yep.
And I can do that in a variety of ways. I can do that by being a really good teacher. I can do that by speaking really good in chapels. I can do that by backing up Jordan and Jeannie because then they'll approve of me. And so I was gaming the system the whole time, so like it never occurred to me, like, is this the way Jesus would do this? It was just, hey, what's going to work for me in the moment to
Right.
get the most acceptance and approval that I can,
Yeah.
you know?
And I
So,
think, yeah.
so, to your point, I was never evaluating it that way. All my aims were purely selfish. Yeah.
And I think that Mike, I'm sure you'll agree with that. I think that was bred in from the beginning as people came in. I mean, in my day, it was, you were in JC Power, which was the leadership group of her youth group in Bellevue, Sparino. But that's what she looked for. She looked for people who were looking for that kind of approval. They weren't necessarily looking for anything else. So what you're saying is, you know, it's ubiquitous, right? It's way more common than not. So, do you agree, Mike?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I do 100%. And I think, just moving on, unless you want to talk something about something before 2020, but when 2020 happened, you had already been gone. You were gone for 3 or 4 years. And so when that happened and you saw everything unfold, take us through that. Like, you guys were already in Colorado, you and Lucy. What
Yeah.
what happened?
Yeah. So, I mean, we left ALC in 2016. We moved out to Colorado. I was at the time working at a painting company doing sales. So driving around to people's houses and telling them how much it would cost to paint their house. And, still had kept up with Jordan and Jeannie over time in like their 100X, cadre group, or we went back for what was supposed to be Jordan's retirement from ALC, but then he stayed another year and everything blew up. But it's 2020. I had gone through a bunch of stuff in my own personal life, where like I had decided, hey, you know what? It's time to get serious about being a whole person, not lying. I started to go to therapy. I'd gone to this crazy pseudo religious retreat that like blew my mind. And I was doing a lot of different things in life because I had made some really, really big mistakes, not only personally, but in my marriage, and things like that, just hiding things from my wife, like smoking or credit card debt, stuff like that. And just kind of realized like, man, I'm this really deceptive person and I should probably figure this stuff out. So started going to a lot of groups to like work through that, and was doing all that. And then 2020, the world blows up. I remember Jordan called me before the news broke and said, hey, I just want to let you know what happened, and all that. And I was like, okay, like, yeah, I'm here for you, obviously as a friend. And then he actually came out to Colorado to spend time with me and another friend. And we were talking to him when the news broke from Victory, the church, like we were there. And so he was telling us stuff about what was going on. And I was like, whoa, like, man, they're painting you like to look really, really bad, but you're saying it wasn't that bad. And like, what's going on with you? What's been happening? And so anyways, then like all this online stuff started happening, like people just posting like, did you hear, whatever. I mean, besides Jeannie and Jordan in Atlanta, Lucy and I were the longest tenured pastors. So we knew
Okay.
people from the early days in Atlanta, and then we knew people from the way later days in Atlanta. And so Jeannie and Jordan were gone. They were off all social media. No one knew anything. And so everyone from early and from middle and from, they were all like reaching out to us. And so I told Lucy, I was like, hey, like we should make a video. And I think at the outset, that video was supposed to be like, hey, like if you're, confused, like reach out to us. We kind of know a little bit about what's going on. But it turned into a 10-minute video of just kind of saying like, hey, like since we left, we realized that a lot of things we did there were not okay. You know, uh since since we've been gone, we've changed. And if you've changed, that's okay too. And all this sort of stuff. Um, and that video ended up getting over 11,000 views on Facebook. There's over 400 comments on it. And for the next 2 weeks, that video thrust me and Lucy back into what felt like working at ALC again, where we had students, we had parents of students from before and after our time reaching out to us, asking what was going on, being mad at us, for the state that their son or daughter was in after spending a couple years at Master's Commission Atlanta or ALC. And so Lucy and I we just tried to be there for people. We tried to affirm what they had gone through. We tried to apologize. We did apologize a lot for ourselves, for Jeannie, for Jordan, because those people were vacant. And so yeah, it just blew up, Mike. It was wild, and it felt like we worked there again, and we had jobs. We had a almost 3-year-old daughter. My wife was pregnant with our second kid at the time, and we're like thrust back into this thing. And then I'll never forget, like while everyone was reaching out to me, all the comments online would be like, "Where's Jeannie at? Like, how come Jeannie hasn't made a video? Like, how come Jordan hasn't made a video? Whatever." And so then it was 2 days after I made my video, Jeannie made a video. She made an apology video, and it was on her Facebook for a couple days before I took it down. And I watched the video, and she said on the video that she had no idea that anything was going on with Jordan in regards to same-sex attraction or anything. She had no idea. And then I saw comments on the video from former staff members and students that said she did know what was going on with Jordan. And then those were deleted. And then people would write like, hey, why was my comment deleted? I said that you did know. And then those comments would be deleted too. And so I was like, well, okay, that's kind of interesting. So I remember typing on her video, I remember typing, thank you, I'll be in touch. And that day I kind of turned into a private investigator, started calling people, started Facebook messaging people, and found out that she did know. She knew. And she knew that Jordan had struggles with same-sex attraction. And she let him be in that position for over a decade with impressionable young men. And so I wrote a letter to Jeannie, talked to some of her board members at YLC, because I knew at that point that she was a devious person like me. I know that she was a very frequent liar. I knew that she would do a lot to cover her tracks. And so I devised a plan to write a letter confronting her about what she knew. And then also I went to some board members of hers and said, hey, I'm going to write this letter to Jeannie. It's going to be confronting her about some stuff. And I'm going to send it to her. I'm going to give her 3 days to respond. And if she doesn't, then I'll send you the letter. Okay. And then you can read the letter and you can do whatever you want, because at that point, in my mind, her youth leaders coach board was the only like authority she kind of had left. I kind of forgotten about the Assemblies of God because at Victory, we're a non-denominational church. And so anyways, so I sent her the letter. I didn't hear for anything for 2 days. Uh, but basically the letter said that, hey, and sometime in 2005, 2006, Jordan himself made you aware that he had a sexual experience with another man. And then sometime in 2007, 2008, a staff member confronted you about Jordan having pornographic materials in his possession and his relationships with men in Master's Commission Atlanta. And then sometime in 2008, 2009, other people confronted you about the same issues. And I said, so you knew, and you lied, and once you know that Jordan struggles with same-sex attraction, everything he did as a discipleship director, you have to see through a different lens. You know, I mean, we all watched him hang out with these guys, go on trips with these guys, have favorites. I mean, I had favorites too, but like, you know, I wasn't potentially attracted to them sexually. But like, I mean, he's buying people gifts. He's flying across the nation and world alone with these guys. He's having these guys spend the night at his house and sleep in his own bed with him. Like if you know that he has the same sex attraction and you're allowing him to do that, that's wrong. Like that's wrong. I told Jordan on the phone this when we were talking while this is happening. I said, "Hey man, if I knew that you struggled this way, I would have said you need to resign or I'll quit." Like because the things you're doing in the name of discipleship and brotherhood, they can very easily cross the line, you know? Um Like, I mean, guys goof off. They mess around. They slap each other on the butt. But like, if you're attracted to a guy and slap him on the butt, that means a totally different thing than if you're just guys horsing around. I think we all know that. And so, anyways, enough about like Jordan. I wrote Jeannie a letter and I said, "Hey, you knew these things, and so what's the right thing to do? Like, you knew these things and you lied to thousands of people because you made this video." So what I think is right for you to do is to make a new video admitting that you knew about Jordan, admitting that you let him do these things without oversight or supervision, admitting that you deleted comments on Facebook and Instagram stating that you knew, and then you need to tell your YLC board staff that you knew. You have 2 days to do those things, or I'm going to send this to your board, and uh, and they can do with you what they will. And I really encouraged her in that letter to forget about her legacy. If you know Jeannie, she is very concerned with her legacy and leaving a legacy. And what does legacy mean? And that old song that we've seen the human video to with all the disciples getting crucified. And, like she's really concerned about her legacy. And I encouraged her in that letter to forget about her legacy, to forget about herself, to do the right thing. Um, and she didn't. And not only did she not, her board members didn't. After she didn't meet my deadline, I reached out to both board members. They ghosted me. And then finally, a day later, I got one of them on the phone and he said, "Hey man, sorry, like I can't help you, but like, as soon as Jeannie got the letter, she showed it to all of us and she immediately started discrediting you and Lucy. And so like they said we're gonna love everyone through this and we're not gonna choose sides." Um and and then so Jeannie didn't meet the deadline with my demands, and I was gonna post a letter online to all the students letting them know what I'd found out. And my wife didn't feel good about it. And within an hour of Jeannie not meeting the deadline, I got a letter from a lawyer representing her with a cease and desist, claiming defamation uh, and stealing proprietary information about the school and her board member. And obviously, as a young father, as someone who does not have a ton of money, as someone who knows Jeannie's board members and how much money they have, defamation lawsuits might not stick, but it's kind of like who has the most money wins. And so I immediately backed off everything. I cut off everything, all the ministering I was doing to people that were going through hurt stuff. I backed away from everything. I dropped everything. Um, yeah, I just dropped it all. So,
Do you have regrets over that?
uh, yeah, a little bit, I think a little bit of me wishes I would have been, I wishes I would have known more than I like more like what I know now, like Mike with you and Jeannie's history and how she probably wouldn't want any legal stuff to happen because then she'd be deposed and a lot of people would be deposed and she'd have to tell the truth otherwise, and so I think that would have made me a little braver back then. Um, but I don't regret confronting her. You know, like
Yeah.
I mean that the getting that letter devastated me, or getting that letter from her lawyers devastated me. You know, because this is, even though at that time I viewed her as a person that had done something very bad, she was still someone that I respected and thought well of. You know, I didn't see her how I see her now, but like it was just, it was devastating to me. And you know, I think the biggest thing, you know, was not only does Jeannie always talk about legacy, but she always talks about character, and she has none. She has none.
Yeah.
She has no
Yeah.
character. And that realization for me, it crumbled my belief in a lot of things, crumbled my belief in what I had chosen to do with my life, which was full-time ministry, the church at large. You know, I mean, it messed me up mentally. I remember having my first panic attack shortly after getting that letter. I had panic attacks at church events for years. You know, only in the past 2 or so years have I started to like show up at church again, but I still wouldn't call myself a Christian. I don't read the Bible. I don't pray. I don't interact at church in a religious way. Church is just my community. It's where my kids go. It's where my wife works. You know, but like I couldn't even, you know, I would drop my kids off at church and I would go and sit in my truck. And then when church is over, I go pick up my kids and I go home. And, you know, if I showed up to a church event with my wife, I would have a panic attack, you know? And it's all because of, you know, the, it's all because of that whole situation. I mean, like no one, I, I did, my wife and I did work at ALC again for 2 years in June of 2020. I mean, it was all I did. You know, like after work, I was on Facebook Messenger. I was talking to people. I was talking to parents. I was listening to their stories. I was there for people in a more genuine, Christ-like way than I ever was when I worked at the school.
Hmm.
You know, and
Yeah.
then I feel this huge passion to reach out to the person responsible for putting Jordan in that position of power, and she lawyers up and shuts me down.
Yeah.
And like it was a nuclear bomb that went off. You know, I
Yeah.
didn't know what to do with this world that I had known for 9 years. You know, yeah, it was pretty heavy. So
Wow. So when all that went down, you you got connected with Melissa and Juliana and those guys, and they started to. There was an investigation. The Assemblies of God, you know, started to investigate. I got interviewed. You got interviewed. Um, And that felt to me when that was happening, I felt like we might be going somewhere here. You know, we might be getting some traction here because they were really
Right.
asking the right questions. Turns out they, you know, I'll let you fill in the blanks, but it feels like that first investigation that they did in 2020 was just basically a slap on the wrist, or I don't know, kind of formality or whatever. But what's your take on that?
yeah, so when I after I backed away from everything, you know, there were a couple times where Jeannie's lawyer's private investigator called me and we would, you know, fight over the phone about like what my role was and all of this, whatever. And I was like, dude, I'm staying out of it. Like I'm not involved in this stuff anymore. And then about, I think it was a month after is when I saw what Juliana had done, and Melissa and Chris, I think Chris and maybe Jonathan, who else am I forgetting? Justin had started that petition. And I was like, oh, you know, and so then I think it was Melissa had reached out to me and she was like, hey, we're interviewing with the Assemblies of God to tell our stories about Jeannie. Would you be willing to do that? And I was like, I don't know, like still kind of scared, like whatever. But I agreed to do it. And so Dr. Mark Merrill, the superintendent of the Georgia district at that time, reached out to me. We set up a time to meet with him and 3 other people. Just, I lived in Colorado at the time. They're in Georgia, obviously. So we talked on the phone. But I remember I was so scared that I was talking to Lucy about this last night, that like when I got on the call, I just said, before we even get started, I want to know how each of you know Jeanne Mayo and how closely you would say you're tied to her.
Sure.
And like I made everyone go around the room and say, and I told him, I said, it's because the reason I had you do that is because she is one of the most deceitful, manipulative people that I've ever met. And if you talk to her outside of this context, she will lie to you about me. Like, she will make up stuff. She will lie to you.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
And so anyways, I told him everything about Jordan. I told him about the letter. And then I told him, I told him two other stories that I thought would be alarming to them as ministers in the Assemblies of God. And number one is that I know of a cadre member that got into an inappropriate relationship with a teenager in their youth group, and was fired. And Jeannie helped that cadre member get a job at another Assemblies of God's church. Do you think that Jeannie encouraged him to be honest about his inappropriate relationship with a minor in his youth group? I doubt it.
No.
And so then I also told the Assemblies of God about a story that happened in Atlanta where we had a student. He was a young man. He was at or over the age of 21 his first year. But in the spring of his first year, his youth pastor called us because a 14-year-old girl in his youth group had come forward and said that she had done sexual things with this youth leader. And so we got that young kid on the phone. Jeannie was there as well with the youth pastor. Me and Jordan were in the room as well. And the youth pastor was asking this kid questions, and he admitted yes. And yes, that he had had this relationship with this 14-year-old girl. And then the youth pastor asked, "Hey, have you had this happen with anyone else?" And he said yes, one other girl around the same age. And I remember weeping because I thought this kid's life was over. I thought, here we go, cops. We're getting everyone involved. This kid's going to jail. Dang, sorry, man, you messed up. Like, that's real. And then Jeannie on the phone goes, "We're not going to let this couple of mistakes ruin this kid's life." And she goes, "Jordan, you go talk to him." And John was the youth pastor's name. Why don't you get on the phone with me and I'll talk you through how to talk to the parents.
Of the
And that
girl?
kid,
The parents of the girl?
yeah, the parents of the girls,
Wow. Okay.
And that kid remained not only at Master's Commission Atlanta, but a youth leader in Oxygen. And then he came back for a second year and was a youth leader again. Do you notice a pattern here?
Yeah.
You have what happened with Jordan. You have what happened with this youth pastor. You have what happened with this young student. And those are only the stories I know. And then, Mike, after everything happens in 2020, I talked to you on the phone for the first time, and you're telling me about stories from Bellevue and Rockford that all sound similar.
Which, by the way, I told Mark Merrill those things too. The stuff that I did know when I was interviewed, I told him about the Bellevue situation. There was one Rockford situation that I knew about that I now I know more Rockford situations because people have come forward. But I told him the one that I did know, and so he's got all this knowledge, Yeah.
I mean, and that's, I've been done with this stuff for 5 years now. Jordan came on, he said he was sorry. I'm still very sorry too for everything that happened while I was on staff in Atlanta. Like, if I hurt you, I'm sorry. If you want to see the real apology video, I did it 5 years ago. Like, I've been out of this for a long, long time. But you sent me that video of Jeannie's victim from Bellevue about a month ago. And then shortly after, Melissa sent us a message that said that the Assemblies of God had finally taken away her ministry credentials. And a lot of people would be very happy about that. It made me furious. Furious. Because the Assemblies of God has known for 5 years what I just told you. About Jordan, about the youth pastor, about the student. Not only were those stories told, but then you had the Facebook group filled with hundreds of stories of students talking about hazing and spiritual and mental and verbal abuse. You had other staff members of hers that were telling these people, Dr. Mark Merrill and the other people on this investigation team. And then the Assemblies of God gave her their blessing by allowing her to continue to minister as a credentialed minister for the next 5 years. Whoop-de-frickin' do, Assemblies of God. Where were you in 2020? Who talked to you, Dr. Mark Merrill? Who from Jeannie's pantheon of people that she has dirt on and that owe her favors, who talked to you and told you to ignore us? Because in these past 5 years, how many other pastors has she covered up for? How many other people that maybe confessed sin out of genuine regret were not told, hey, you know what? It's probably time to go sell insurance, buddy. I mean, that's the most infuriating part. And then the Assemblies of God just has all this stuff with Chi Alpha happen, and there's a lot of similarities there. And then you have some lady at General Counsel this year giving some whoop-de-doo, in my opinion, kind of half-assed apology about how the investigation kind of went down. It's like, this stuff has been going on for a long time in your organization, people. Wake up. Wake up. Because if what you and Brian and the other people are telling us, stories have been circulating about Jeannie for decades.
Yeah. Yeah.
And no
I
one has.
went to Rick Lormer and I went to Rod Whitlock, two national youth directors for the Assemblies of God back in, 2007, 2008, somewhere in that frame, and told them this stuff, some of this, I told them all this, and they didn't disagree because they had their own experiences with her. I didn't tell them about the stuff that they didn't know about, but I did tell them about, what happened with Jennifer and Doug Woodard and, the coach that was covered up, all that. And they knew that. I wasn't telling them they were on staff then in Bellevue when all that was going on. So they knew all that, chose to look the other way. Again, their whole thing is, she puts butts in the seats. Look at her ministry. She's blessed, and look at the fruit. And they're just so deceived thinking that fruit is numbers. And it's just sickening, man. It's power, it's money, it's influence. It's just stupid. And they
It's
knew.
yeah, it's terrible. I mean, it's awful. And I was telling Lucy last night, like, anyone that knows this stuff about her and looks the other way, she clearly has something on them that they don't want known publicly,
Right.
like she's covering up something for them. That in some altar moment at whatever, they confess that they did XYZ, and you know, she absolved them of their sin, and now they feel like they got to protect her,
Right.
uh, that's what I think, like, because I mean, you talk about the fruit, Mike. The only people that see the fruit are the people from the cheap seats.
Right.
She was
Right.
run out of Rockford. She was run out of California. She was run out of Victory. Like, either everyone in the world is crazy or something is wrong with the way Jeanne Mayo does ministry. You
Right.
know, like, what are we talking about? But it's the
Right.
way she controls the narrative. She throws it in your face. She throws, like, it's what she tried to do to defame your book. Like, she goes to a youth conference and makes some funny joke about, I have some crazy former staff member that's writing some book full of lies about me. Yeah, but like, she throws it right in your face, and you go, oh,
Yeah.
well, if she's being this upfront about it, there's no way it can be true. That's the
Right.
beauty of it.
Right.
It's the beauty of it. Like, I was telling my wife this, I don't mean to, like, but just
You're good.
the deceptive nature of her is so brilliant. Like, when obviously Atlanta after Rockford, okay, the cadre in the afternoon of the first day, or in the morning of the second day of the first cadre that the person would ever show up for, she did a whole segment on how to handle her in ministry. Okay. And the whole story was about Rockford and about how she was wronged and run out of town and all this sort of stuff. Okay. And she told it for years. Obviously, none of that is probably true. Like, Mike, you've told me some of the real stuff, but like, what she would do this beautiful thing. Okay. Where every morning she would let Pastor Sam, say hi to everybody before he left to go work at the tabernacle. And so everyone would sit down and she'd be getting ready to start the session. And then she would have Sam come in and Sam would wave at everybody. And, she'd say, "This is my hero." And everyone would clap for him. And then he'd leave and she'd get on the mic and she'd go, "Okay." And then she'd go, Judy, is he gone?" And, someone would come in and go, "Yeah, he's gone." And then she would launch into this whole story about Rockford and how it was because Sam wasn't growing the church fast enough and XYZ reasons and all this sort of
Ah,
stuff.
makes me
And
mad.
so you sit there and you go, "Oh my gosh, she's protecting her husband and she wants to make sure that he's not hurt while she relives this hurt. Look at how beautiful it all is." No, she wanted to make sure he was gone because she lied to everybody about why they were let go. And she didn't want him to know that she was telling those lies to everybody.
Right.
But that's the beauty of what she would do and how she would manipulate things. And you look back on it and you go, "Oh my goodness gracious." Like, she definitely knew what she was doing.
Oh,
And
100%.
And that's the thing, like a lot of the people write off this stuff as like accidental hurt or whatever. No. And I told some family members this a couple years ago. I don't say this stuff about Jeanne Mayo because I disagree with the way that she does ministry, because I disagree with how I was treated when I was on staff, which was relatively good. Like me and her didn't have a super close relationship. She wasn't mean to me, whatever. Jeanne Mayo is an evil person. She uses religion to gain acceptance and approval and favor from other people and to make herself feel self-important. She is a bad actor. She is a bad person. That's who she is.
Yeah.
This stuff
Yeah.
isn't accidental.
No.
It's who she chooses to be. It's who she's been for decades.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And
that's like,
one of the things that you said when you confronted the board members, and that board member said, got back to you and said, "I'm gonna love her through this, that we're gonna love all parties." That to me immediately, that's what he was told to say. And that's how she was spinning it, right? Let's just love them. Let's just love them too. They're not seeing it the way God sees it. So we're gonna love them. I got into it with Reggie Dabbs when all this stuff went down. I called him out on the podcast because he's another one that I thought he was my friend, tried to tell him about, kind of what you just said, that there's behind closed doors, there's a whole different side of her that you have not seen. And he did not want to hear it. He didn't want to see it, didn't want to hear it. And so now that it's all coming out, now you don't have a choice. Now it's the Assemblies of God is saying she's done, right? We're taking her papers. She's done. And so he still doesn't want to see it. And this is exactly what he said to me. So that's why I know that she's coaching, because he said the same thing. He said, "I'm choosing to love, you know, I'm going to love her through, I'm all about love, and you're not about love. You're about, hurting her." And so I said back to him, I said, "Reggie, you're not loving her.
mhm,
You're not loving her.
no,
You're full of shit, because you're protecting yourself. You might be right. She might have something on him. I don't know, but you can't say that you love her if you're allowing her to be this evil. You're this manipulative, this hurtful, this malicious, and you're going to say you love her? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Like, if you really loved her, you would see how ill she is.
yeah,
She's ill. I mean,
yep,
she's sick. There's something wrong with this pathological liar. When you're that pathological about it, there's an illness. There's a mental illness of some kind. As well, I'm not an expert, so I'm alleging this. I don't know for sure, but the little that I do know, oh my goodness, there's something wrong. And you can't say you love her if you're allowing her to be like this. No, you're getting paid by her. She pays you a lot of money to come in and speak to these students. And by the way, Mr. Dabbs, you're there to minister to those students. They looked up to you. And when that went down, Adam, I was online when she was pulling those statements down. Well, Reggie was jumping in and saying things. And I texted him because we were friends. And so I said, "Dude, if I was, knowing what I know, I
yeah,
said, you need to probably back up off this because there's more to this than you think. And he did listen to me that night, but then he doubled down because she got a hold of him probably and
Yep.
cried and went through the whole thing. And he went right back to being, a good son, which means hatchet man, I did it, you did it, right? It just it's just so don't say you love her. Stop saying that, you people. Board members, stop saying you love her by protecting her and then exposing these kids that are, you
Yep.
know, vulnerable to her. Don't say that anymore. Please don't, because if you do, I'm gonna call you out. It's ridiculous. Read your Bible. My God.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even like even outside of the religious world, if there was this level of cover up of for a CEO or whatever of a company, people would be calling for jobs. Like, I mean,
Right.
gosh, the Assemblies of God, knowing what they know now, and if anyone from the Assemblies of God pays attention to this podcast, there needs to be an investigation into the investigation that was done into Jeanne Mayo in 2020.
100%.
And I think people need to lose their licenses or lose their positions. It's ridiculous to have the outrage at someone coming off a fresh firing where there's smoke, there's fire. And then you have a guy come to tell you, I've been working with her for 7 years and she covers up for people for a living. Not only is there smoke, it's a bonfire
Right.
of inappropriate things. And then you look the other way. And so, man, if you're the Assemblies of God, I mean, like, you got some explaining to do. And it's not enough just to, in my opinion, to just quietly pull her credentials. I think there needs to be a press release that goes out about what's being uncovered about Jeanne Mayo, because for decades you guys propped her up as America's #1 youth pastor. I was there at General Council in like 2014, where you guys gave her the Influencers Lifetime Achievement Award for her leadership in your in your denomination. And so, hey, if you're going to use her as your poster child, and then you're going to ignore the facts when the stuff hits the fan, you got some answering to do, because people like me are not satisfied knowing that you knew 5 years ago, AG, AOG, whatever, you knew 5 years ago because I told you and I was there. It wasn't secondhand information. Yeah, you told them too, and you were there. It wasn't hearsay. It happened. I lived it. And
Right.
it's
Right,
just
and
ridiculous.
then painting us as gossipers and,
Yep.
detractors and backslidden and whatever all the labels that we got put on us because we're trying to tell the truth. You need to apologize to me, and you need to apologize to Adam. You need to apologize to those students that, you know, put their necks on the line to tell the truth. I mean, you're all about the truth, right? Assemblies of God, we're ministers of the truth. Well, we're trying to tell you the truth, and we just got shut down. And now it's in your face, and now you have egg on your face, and it's too bad. And the Rick Lormas of the world, the Jeremy DeWerts, the Rod Whitlocks, and Gary Hoyts, all those guys that would not see it. Reggie Dabbs, now you have to see it. And you owe the world an apology. You do. You should apologize. You should. And you should apologize to her because you didn't love her. You were just feeding off her. You were getting what you could off her. Rod Whitlock goes and puts her name and her picture on his website to promote himself, knowing she's dirty, and then when I'm trying to tell him more information, he shuts me. He blocked me. He blocked me because he didn't want to hear the truth. Yeah, but you're a
Yeah.
minister of the truth. Bullshit.
Yeah.
Bullshit. You're just Jesus is a prop in your play. That's what
Yeah.
this is all about. He's a prop in your play. You're just pushing your career forward and becoming the big whatever you are. And
Yeah.
and you use Jeanne Mayo, and shame on you. Ugh.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, man. This is your time, and I'm taking it up. Sorry.
No, dude, you're totally fine. I mean, like, that's really all I got to say. And like, that's the only reason I'm on this podcast, like, is to call out the AG, because I left all this stuff 5 years ago. I worked through
Yep.
all of it in therapy and counseling. I'm healthier than I've ever been. I'm probably a better Christian not being a Christian than I ever was when I was a pastor even. But like, dude, it's just that when I heard their credentials got pulled, I was like, I got to shout something from the rooftops. And that is, hey, I told you about all this stuff 5 years ago and you guys did nothing, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, man. And then, I know that with Jordan's video, there's a lot of like discussion with the students and all that sort of stuff now. Once again, if you want to see me be apologetic, find my video from 5 years ago. Lucy and I are so sorry for the things that we were involved in at ALC, at MCATL. We were stupid kids. That's not an excuse, but that is the reason. And, we apologize. We can't apologize enough for some of the things that we did. We own what we did. We own that we were a part of that system. I was a part of that system. I was the assistant director of that school for a couple years before I left. Like, um, I did things poorly too, but like I didn't cover up for predators. I think there's a
Yeah.
difference, you
Yeah.
know?
So one of the things that's been coming out, and I wasn't there in Atlanta at all, obviously. So, but what's coming out is some racism stuff. There's been some accusations of students of black students and Hispanic students saying, I mean, even accusing you and
Sure.
Jordan of things in Jeannie, obviously, the whole system basically favoring white people. And did you see any of that? Did you see racism?
Uh, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't. Yeah, I mean, people will the people that use the term racism will want me to say it's racism. So like, but white people of a certain type were definitely favored. You know what I'm saying? Like
Right.
white, upper middle class, sharp people, those sort of people were favored. Like I was talking to Lucy about this the other night. Like, for some reason Jeannie always seemed to think that black people were lazy, even when there was really kind of no reason, it just was said behind closed doors, stuff like that, like little comments. And it was like, you work at a prominently African American church, like your youth group is full of black kids, how many of those did she foster and help grow and minister to and treat like some of the white kids that came through her program. I know it was always kind of joked about by students that were black and students that were Hispanic that PJ never had any favorites that were people of color. Like it was something that people joked about. I don't know if people ever joked about stuff like that with me. I had dudes that were really close to me that were Puerto Rican, that were half black, that were Indian. So like if someone thought I was a racist or said racist things, I'm sorry, but I don't view myself as a racist. I hope I never said racist things, but I would definitely say the system favored a certain type of person for sure. And you could say the system was sexist too, like for Jeanne Mayo being a woman in ministry, I never really saw her champion other women in ministry, there were not a lot of women that made it to support staff. There were not a lot of women that made it to support staff that got full-time youth minister roles after they were on support staff, but a lot of the guys did, so it was like, um, yeah, I mean, you could say it was sexist as well. And I'll put a hand up accountability on the sexist stuff too. There were a lot of times when girls would want to come back for their intern year, I would say, no, they wouldn't be able to cut it as a youth pastor, and why? Probably no other reason than they were a woman. And I thought they couldn't do it as a woman, you know, and that was a guy that worked with Jeanne Mayo. So hand up accountability on that one, like things were a little sexist there. I'll admit that. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
I appreciate you being honest about that kind of stuff because again, and I'm not making excuses for anybody, but it's when you're in that system, you're going down that strong river of culture with all these social norms. And you said it at the beginning, you weren't really trying to do this for Jesus. You were really just trying to get ahead and do the right thing. So you read the room. You go, what's going to get me promoted? What's going to get me, where I need to be? And so you do these things. You do what the flow is, right? It's not like you're not your own person. You're kind of going with what's happening. And And that doesn't absolve you from responsibility of it. And I think you've done that really well by looking at it yourself and going, yeah, I was part of this system, and then I had to do the same thing, Adam. I had to when I got out of it, I had to call some people and go, "I'm sorry." Right? I was doing it too, and um, yeah, and I think that's just taking responsibility for it. Again, you're not
Yeah.
like, I think some people got confused with the whole Jordan thing. Like, he was when we were talking about that, about the system he was in, it felt like to some of them that he was absolving himself of responsibility. I didn't hear that because he had tried to really own it. We kept steering him to the system because I want to talk about that. I want to talk about this cult-like system that he was a part of, and I think I remember talking to Mark Rumpel one time. He was a junior high pastor in Rockford, and he said this. He said when he got away from her, he used the analogy of being like unfrozen, right?
Yep.
Like you unfreeze, and you realize you were frozen in a mindset, and so you did things in that mindset, and yeah, you need to take responsibility for them. You do. I do. We all do. But at the same time, you have to acknowledge the fact that that was the culture. And to get ahead in that culture, you had to do what was expected. And so, you know, you own it, but then investigate it at the same time, I think. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
No, it totally does. I mean, nothing, there's not a lot of this scenario that's like very black or white, like even in Jordan's interview, he talked about, being, being, being like almost like being preyed upon, but then turning around and being a perpetrator. And like that was all of us. Like I didn't just stroll into ALC or MCATL as a staff member. Like I was a student there. I had to go through a second year interview where all the staff sat on the other side of me and talked to me about XYZ. And I remember crying in that interview because they were talking about really sensitive things to who I was as a person. I was I went through it and then I turned around and I did it to other people, you know? Um, and that's how it worked there. You were first year, then you were second year, and you treated people like second years treated you. And then you were an intern and you treated second years and first years like interns treated you. And, we were all doing it. It was all a cycle, and
Yeah.
for as many, yeah, yeah. So it's
So to
wild.
close this up, I know you already made an apology. You and Lucy, did that video, and I watched that video, and that's when I actually started really. I never met you. I don't think I might have met you, but I don't remember. But because I came in and out of there, but um, I remember thinking this guy's a man. Like that's a man. That you were the first one that pretty much said it. And then I saw all that, and then I saw everybody coming on board and that petition and all that, and um, I was like, I'm writing my book. Because I saw them starting to cover it up. I'm like, "No, I'm not gonna do that." So, I'm not gonna let this die, at least on my end. I don't know whether I didn't know this was gonna go where it's going now, but I wanted to write that book and tell the truth because I knew I had a strong voice because I was part of her ministry back in Rockford and Bellevue. So, all that to say, you did make that apology, but if you could do it, if you could say, if you look at those students right now and the ones that are really processing this stuff and what would you say to them as far as healing goes? And yeah, what would you
Yeah. I
say?
mean, I would say, yeah, I mean, I would say a quote that really spoke to me a lot in 2020 when I was going through everything with everyone was it was from Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, and it's when Albus Dumbledore and Harry are looking for one of Lord Voldemort's Horcruxes, which if you're not a fan, that won't make sense to you, but if you are a fan, that will. And he says to Harry, Harry, we must try not to sink beneath our anguish, but battle on. And so to any former students or staff members that are still struggling with stuff, even after you've heard an apology from Jordan or myself or whatever, because even the words don't make it all right. I would just encourage you to battle on. And battling on looks a lot different for a lot of people, but for me, it looked like seeking out professional counseling, multiple types of counseling, multiple counselors. I was in and out of counseling for 7 years. From 2016 to 6 years, 2018 to 2024, in and out of counseling. So go get professional help. But some of you might need medication. I was on antidepressants for about 6 months, or no, almost a year, from 2021 to 2022 to deal with what I was going through, the fallout of what happened with Jeannie, and the school. And so and then also community. I know that, for a lot of you, you've walked away from church, from religion, and like that's cool. I don't think any less of you, but find community. Find community somewhere, either in a rec softball league, or a hiking group, or a run club, or something. But get connected. Get connected to people again. Um, and like me, like I'm not a Christian anymore. I don't do any of that stuff, but church is my community, because my wife works at a church, and so where else am I going to get community? At some bar or something? Like, no, I'll get my community at church. There's great people at church. um and so, yeah, get community. And then, just battle on, man. I mean, keep doing the work to get healthy and to move forward. Once again, I'm sorry for the part that I played in some of the damage that you have to live with. There's a lot of years there that I really struggled with a lot of regret and shame, um, for all that. But we all have to move on. And healing has no timeline, and so I give you none. Like, it took
Right.
me 3 or 4 years to get through it. It's 2025. It's been half a decade, but it took me 3 or 4 years to really get on the other side of it and to get healthy. And so I
Yeah.
give you no timeline. This is not like hey, buck up. It's been 5 years. No, dude, take as much time as you need to sit with
Yep.
it, to process it. Um, but just don't let it own you, you know, don't let it own you. So, cause then me or Jordan or Jeannie or whoever hurt you owns a little bit of you, and I don't want
Right.
that. I don't want that. I don't want Jeannie to own any part of me, So like I've
Yeah.
let it go. I've moved on, like this is probably the last time I will be in this world, and the only reason I'm here is because of what happened. Like, other than that, I've moved on from this, and I hope the same for you. For any student that's still struggling, I hope the same for you, that you get to that place someday.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. This is your swan song, and you're making it our podcast, Groomed.Connect is the way to explain that and to make your exit. So I appreciate that, Adam. I really do. Um, Brian, he's having technical difficulties, so he
Yeah.
to jump off, but I'm sure he echoes, I know he does, that he's really glad that you came on. And those of you that are watching this right now, don't forget that we have a new playlist on this channel. It's groomed.help. And we just try to put some stuff up this week. I'm going to be talking about anger and there's some things, it's okay to be angry, and I just want to give you a few minutes on that, and so check that out, and we'll see you guys next week. Adam Hulme, thank you so much for your vulnerability and your honesty, man.
Thank you, and Brian. Be strong, you guys.